Hey everyone, welcome to Office Hours with Cloud Posse, your weekly dose of insider DevOps trends, AWS news, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community, plus a live Q&A that you can't find anywhere else. It's October 18th, 2023, and I'm your host, Eric Osterman. Real quick, I'm the founder and the CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator for startups. We help teams who are overwhelmed with AWS, and we do this by using our library of 200 plus Terraform modules that have all been battle tested and downloaded over 10 million times. No matter where you find yourself on this journey, we're here to help your startup, whether it's to build a modern, reliable, scalable infrastructure, transform your ClickOps into a well-oiled DevOps machine, or leverage some of our open source rock-solid Terraform blueprints. We have your back. The result? You launch better products faster, free up your bandwidth for innovation, and nail your value delivery every time. And if you or your team has been banging your head against the wall with underperforming infrastructure, just head over to cloudposse.com/quiz. Again, cloudposse.com/quiz. Answer a few quick questions, and we'll chart a roadmap for success free. Worst case, you get a clear roadmap for shoring up your infrastructure. Best case, we co-build it with you and empower your DevOps team in 90 days or less. So how can you maximize today's session? First off, our format is very informal. Engage as much as you'd like, ask questions. And if you're curious about any of our open source tools or modules, go for it. For those on the recording, we host these calls live, so don't miss out. Join us by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Again, cloudposse.com/officehours. Now, I have one ask. If you find any portion of today's office hours valuable, share it with your team. Just head over to youtube.com/cloudposse or send us a short testimonial about the value you're getting in our Slack. Just go to slack.cloudposse.com. Remember, we're not just creating content here, we are building a community. So with that said, let's get started with some announcements. First one that caught my radar isn't really DevOps-y related, but it's Amazon has rolled out support for passkeys. This is Amazon.com, not AmazonAWS.com, kind of hoping that, maybe once that burns in there, they'll be extending that to work with Amazon's Identity Center. Unfortunately, that implementation doesn't work with mobile apps, so you'll still have to continue logging in however you've been logging in before. The next one is a piece that was interesting only because HashiCorp has been pretty reserved in addressing or even acknowledging OpenTofu or the fork of Terraform. In this interview, or in this article, and then a subsequent video interview, it kind of goes through some of the internal thinking within HashiCorp and is revealing, among other things, they don't believe there's a future in the current model of open source and how it works, at least in the enterprise context. I don't know. Says a lot of obviously what influenced their decision. And then the corresponding video, we'll share that also. Welcome back to in the channel. You can watch that later. So that's an interview with the CEO. Anyone have something to add to that before I continue?
I was just wondering if they plan to stop using any open source libraries in any of their stuff then.
I think that's not necessarily what they mean. I think commercial open source is more like what they're talking about. Obviously, it's a rhetorical question. We know they're not going to stop using open source in their products, but yeah. There's some other article, I think it's on the Linux Foundation website itself, I didn't share, which lays out their perspective on the whole matter. I should have added that. Here was an interesting one. Somebody created a little project, which also has a little GitHub repo. I found this pretty cool. So here's the GitHub repo that generates a bunch of slides on the health of the OpenTofu project. Obviously, this is probably something like a little weekend project to learn Go or something, but it's cool. So that produced this slide deck here. So you can understand how OpenTofu is doing compared to the Terraform code base itself. I don't have any things really to highlight based on these that I recall at least, but Things like this is interesting because there's a lot of concern about if OpenTofu has legs, and everything in these slides indicates that it does so far. All right. Next one here. I only skimmed this one, but if it is what I think it is, I'm really excited about it. So one of the awesome things about GitHub is they have 1 million toggles to lock down your repositories. The problem is when you also have 1 million repositories, you have a Cartesian product of possibilities. Managing that at scale is difficult. There's a project by GitHub to manage repo settings with GitOps. This is not the one that, it's called safe setting. So this is the one we've been considering rolling out. I still think this is probably the way we'll go, and is the more powerful, longer term option for managing repository settings. However, if you're familiar with that repo, that'll make this announcement a little bit more clear. I believe you can now manage more centrally the rules that you want to, like the patterns for repo configurations that you want, and then use those recipes to configure other repositories. I'm not sure to what extent it supports all the features of repo settings. Also, as implemented, it's not very GitOps friendly, but I'm pretty sure somebody's probably going to create a GitHub action like yesterday to implement this. Has anyone taken a deeper look into this one? All right. Next announcement. I thought this one is apropos for our team on the Zoom today. So if you're interested in attending one of OpenTofu's office hours, they've just announced those. You can subscribe to the ICS file here and add it to your calendar, and join their office hours. Looks like the next one is Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, which was today, I guess, earlier. Did anyone go to that? This is kind of cool. Amazon's MSK now supports a replication service. This is convenient for multiple reasons. Obviously, it's convenient for DR and HA and all those sorts of things. But also, if you're looking to migrate MSK from one account to another, now you could set up that replication and then shut down the old account. Also, something that'll be exciting for those who have been waiting on active replication for Postgres. Amazon announces support for the plugin called called the PG Active plugin. And that actually supports supposedly active replication. And you can have databases running now in multiple regions and write to up to 16 different writer instances. So has anyone already kicked the tires on this? Multi-master is something we've been really waiting for, and AWS's global RDS service leaves a lot to be desired, and we've stopped deploying it. So I'm hoping this is a much easier solution to maintain. Major version upgrades were a real pain with the global RDS option on AWS. All right. Next announcement is Tembo. So Tembo is a new startup we've been excited to follow. Tembo is building a modern implementation of a hosted Postgres service. It's not necessarily that unlike Neon Is it neon.tech? Yeah, Neon is a serverless Postgres cloud managed by them. Tembo is something similar. Tembo also has a huge ecosystem of plugins managed via the Cargo repo system for Rust. And there are literally like hundreds of plugins they support. So one of the problems, obviously, if you're on Amazon and using Postgres, you can't install all the wealth of plugins available. Well, that changes if you use Tembo. And what Tembo has now done is release their Terraform provider. So now you can provision your Postgres databases and all the plugins, etc., through Terraform. So if you've been unhappy with RDS, this might be something to check out. All right. That's all that I got on my list of announcements. Anyone have something else? I see there was something posted here. Alex Atkinson says Dashlane announced Passkey a while back and it's looking good. You know, I gave up on Dashlane some time ago. I was not too happy with it, but hey, everything should support Passkey, so that's good.
What was your problem with it? I find it perfect for my personal use.
Yeah, it was just not intelligent for me in filling out forms and saving things, and ended up with lots of duplicate entries. So I moved back to 1Password and haven't looked back. I'm really happy with 1Password. And,
yeah, my big complaint with Dashlane is the button is just so easy to click, update a credential here or make a duplicate. It's a little annoying, but
yeah,
no, 1Password's the best if you have teams and you need to manage like groups of different password sets. Can't beat it.
yeah. So Dashlane for personal use. Hey, but guess what? Just a heads up, if anybody is using 1Password for Teams in a business setting, you're probably also getting 1Password for families. So that's what we use in my family here is 1Password for families. And that's free because through my business, we already get 1Password for Teams. So that could be an option. So actually, you know, everyone at the company can have a 1Password for their family. And OpenTofu is now available. The alphas are available on N0, so that's cool. Spacelift also, Spacelift, what do they call it? Workflows. Yeah, I think it's a really bad name that they're calling it, but Spacelift also did the same thing, introducing what they're calling custom workflows, which is really just custom Terraform commands, not actual like custom workflows.
That's really confusing. Why would they do
that? Right. So I think it was a misnamed release. And it kind of shoots themselves in the foot for adding true workflows later, if you ask me, but okay. So that's, yeah, you're going to see this coming out from everyone now, from Scalar, Spacelift, and N0 is support for OpenTofu. All right. Any, let's see, any other announcements? Was there something else in the chat here, I think? There. Okay, yeah, those were the two announcements there. Hey, Jeremy, did you come across anything else? Nope. All right. Amazon to spend $1 billion on Microsoft 365 Cloud Suite.
I'd buy it for $2. I hate the thing.
Yeah, interesting. Well, because that's really interesting because Amazon sells their own productivity suite, right? With or is that just for email, the Amazon offering? I don't know. what's it even called?
I have no idea.
Work mail, I guess, is maybe what I was thinking of. So that's different. I just combine the two things together. So yeah, I guess they don't have an office productivity suite yet. Yeah, so a cool $1 billion software subscription. That's interesting. All right. Other announcements? Work docs. Oh, no, Chris. So there is Amazon Work docs. Okay, so I wasn't crazy. So that's kind of bad if Amazon is subscribing to Office 365, but also peddling Work docs and isn't using it internally. That's not a vote of confidence. All right. Anything else, guys? Or gals? Or gals? Cool. Well, let's get into a Q&A then. So the way this works is, yeah, if you have a question, post it in the Q&A portion of the Zoom chat here, and we'll get to it. Or post it in the chat, I guess. And we'll get to it here. So Sean Roberts asked, question for discussion. Who actually uses Driftctl and would like to see it continued to be maintained?
Sorry, I put it in the Q&A for you as well. Forgot about that one.
Oh, that's cool. The Q&A is a brand new thing. We just started using that. So yeah, talking about Driftctl. For those not familiar, Driftctl is a tool that hit the open source, I believe, well over a couple of years ago, and set out.
It's Apache. Yeah.
What was that?
It's Apache licensed.
Yeah, cool.
It was developed in open, and then Snyk, the developers, Snyk hired the developers. And then now it says unmaintained, and I'm not clear if that's because they're not maintaining it all, because they're making their own in-house thing, or if it's because something you noticed around the time of the Terraform, the HashiCorp license change, that they made some notes about not supporting any. So, but yeah, it isn't. If you've not used it, just to play one time, it is so impressive. Like, we have more than 1,000 Terraform root modules, roots, and we need to be able. I'm not using this in production because of I can't use production things in production that don't have a good support behind them. But we need to be able to know what's drifted in our infrastructure, and the really cool feature that people don't highlight with this is know every single Amazon resource that is not in my Terraform. So in the compliance world, they might call that rogue assets or unmanaged assets, unmanaged resources. So I threw this at just, you don't give it your Terraform code, you give it a bucket or wherever your state is stored. I threw Driftctl, just an S3 bucket thing with a wildcard, and it scanned the entire S3 bucket, found 700 Terraform state files. That was just for one of our environments. And 10 minutes later, it showed me every single resource, which were under management, which weren't managed by Terraform, and which were drifted. I'm looking to use it more, and I'm like, oh crap, it's losing its maintainership, probably because the license changed. I'm thinking, okay, should this be a community thing now? Even though it is Apache license, and they're good about taking contribution, should have a community effort, because it solves a big part of the Terraform story. So, and I was just curious who else is out there using it.
Yeah, they were the only ones crazy enough to actually implement something like this. I don't believe it's an easy endeavor. Most of the implementations of drift detection are really just about identifying if your known resource is managed by Terraform or drifting. And this project was ambitious in trying to identify kind of like your code coverage for infrastructure as code, telling you, hey, these resources, yeah, are not covered by your code.
It also just does it faster. So it has a gap in that it's comparing the state file to your infrastructure. It's not actually running your code.
True.
Which is why it can be so fast. Because if I had to run a Terraform init and then a Terraform plan against those 500 plus routes, I'd have to download tons of modules. It would take an hour. With this, it's looking at the state. The gap in there is you can't compare your code base. You have to compare the state, but it is incredibly fast. Just even for the managed resources, its ability to do that. But yeah, it's a lot of work because on their side, they've actually set the operations to go and talk to Amazon and GitHub, Azure, and GCP. So, but
yeah,
I don't think it's the tool's not known well enough. I think if it was known more, it'd have more maintainership.
it's definitely come up many, 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 many times on office hours. But yeah, I actually I didn't realize it. I know we talked about this on office hours recently because of the license change. I don't know if it has anything to do with the license change. I think somebody went to the Wayback Machine and was able to kind of identify that was not the case. But anyways, I didn't realize that Sneak had acquired the tool. That's too bad. Another one bites the dust. Guess.
Well, no, they acquired this tool a long time ago, more than a year.
Yeah.
So, and they've kept it Apache. They are good about taking contributions. They're just saying that they aren't actively maintaining it. I don't think they'd have a problem with the community taking it further. That's why I was curious if others had interest to help maintain it, because I was tempted to, if there are other people from other organizations, I was tempted to reach out to them to start trying to see if we can help maintain it with a couple other people at other organizations.
I was just seeing if there was any call to, donate to CNCF or anything.
That was my thought. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we're at Cloud Posse. We're just going, for example, with our GitHub Actions route, in with the easier approach of doing easier technical implementation approach of doing the Terraform plan to identify drift and doing that in a matrix, so it all happens in parallel, and that does speed things up considerably.
Does that happen only when y'all change code, or does that happen like retrospectively? Like
we have it on both on merge to main to identify drift, as well as on a cron schedule that it's configurable.
Cool.
And then it opens up GitHub issues if it detects drift. Cool. Let's see another Q&A here, maybe, or is that the same one? Okay, that's done. All right. Any other questions? Any Q-based tooling that is ready for this topic? Q-based, I mean, Q the language? And I don't get the connection to, I'm maybe missing something in the thread here. So yeah, I don't think Q would solve anything related to drift detection, but we've only explored it from the language perspective of, for example, generating YAML, and that's an interesting approach, but we have not looked at it in any way that it would help with drift. Alex posts a link here to TileDB. TileDB closes 34 million Series B to advance the vision of the modern database as an alternative to the modern data stack. Anything about this you can highlight, Alex? There's so many database technologies now, I can't keep my...
They just keep coming out. Nobody likes the database we have. No, There's nothing specific here, but someone throwing 34 million bucks at an idea, like maybe it's worth looking at.
Yeah.
I see it's got one of the co-founders of Mongo there funding this venture. So yeah, I have not had time to dive into the tech and see exactly, how are they storing their data? Like, what are they doing different?
Yeah, I mean, so many of these are highly for specialized use cases, like ClickHouse being for time series data, and Well, then, like we just talked about, Tembo, which is prioritizing Postgres and Postgres ecosystem of plugins, and then Neon Tech, which is prioritizing like branching of databases, so you can create ephemeral, like short-lived databases and development environments and all kinds of things.
Yeah, it looks like they're focused on multi-dimensional use cases like data science, things like that.
All right. Any other questions we can get answered on the call today? Or other interesting announcements? Otherwise, there's no questions. We can always end the session early. Boy, that hasn't happened in like a year, I think, but.
Do you mind speaking? I know you have in previous calls. I probably missed. Speaking a bit more to your drift detection. I forgot if y'all are y'all doing it purely from GitHub Actions, or is that or are you using Atlantis, or are you using purely GitHub Actions with your own initiatives?
No, we're using we have our Cloud Posse tool called Atmos, which is a way of defining all your infrastructure configuration. It's like Atlantis it's like Atlantis's projects.yaml on steroids, right? Then, since we have a definition of all your projects, we can very easily query that data model and do things with it. So what we did was we created some integrations with GitHub, and we created a GitHub action for Terraform plan and Terraform apply. The drift detection looks like we haven't yet published the documentation here. Our focus is really on supporting customers for that, but it is also all open source, and everything we have is on Cloud Posse's GitHub.
Yeah, I saw the action there. That's what I was asking. I saw that for GitHub. So.
Yeah, let's see here. Action.
In our case, we can't use our GitHub for that. Our GitHub is not allowed to touch the infrastructure because all of our developers have it, and so we have separate toolings that allow. So we couldn't use GitHub Actions, but just.
But I don't understand the reasoning, because there's so many controls on what runners can be used, what repos can use those runners, and you can control the roles through GitHub OIDC.
Yeah, so it's more of a current corporate issue, because our GitHub is not just used by our department; it's used by more than like wider departments. So the overall management of it, based on certain compliance and stuff out there, you have to have something at every single tier, certain protections and whatnot, and controls. So until we have things at every tier that we can trust, then the GitHub actions aren't viable. But we're doing similar things. So it's not, we can reuse what exists there that others are doing, and we have. I mean, there's certain things we've borrowed from others or adapted to our own use cases. So.
Yeah, I would like to do a more comprehensive demo of all of it. I'd prefer to allocate a specific office hours to doing it, so that we can kind of drum up some interest and get more people on the show to watch it and provide some feedback. The TLDR, though, is yes, it runs on. I'll just do a high level. This is just GitHub being GitHub. There we go. High level actions for planning and applying and doing drift detection and drift remediation. And then the standard workflows that you would come to expect for something like that defined here. So workflows for apply, workflows for planning and remediation, for example. So if we look at the drift detection, which you were interested in, this is running on a cron schedule that's configurable. and it selects a number of components using a GitHub action that we have to select the components. That works with right now. It's just a complex JQ expression, so we could have maximum flexibility. Obviously, we would like to improve that from a DX perspective and make it easier. But the gist of it is, using this pattern, you could select different components and run those actually on different cron schedules if you wanted to. So if you have critical infrastructure, you could run plans on an hourly basis, for example, while do a 24-hour scan of everything else. In this case here, we're doing a 12-hour scan of all the components in the account. So that computes a matrix, and then using that matrix, we plan everything. And then we take a look at everything that ran and calculate what drift was detected from that.
Okay, cool.
But the fancy stuff is the part I'm not showing you, which is how we have maximized the GitHub UI to convey all of this in a way that we haven't seen other companies really leveraging yet.
Thanks.
Cool. Oh, Oscar asks, what's the link for the Cloud Posse Actions overview? Well, we have the GitHub Actions under Atmos tools. I'll post it here. Then we also have our docs.cloud posse and the building blocks. And this documents all of the other GitHub actions that we have in our ecosystem. What we're doing for GitHub and GitHub Actions is pretty similar to what we did for Terraform. We are not looking to reinvent the wheel. So we're not looking to recreate GitHub Actions that already exist, but we wrap other GitHub Actions in an opinionated manner that fits within our philosophy for release engineering. So if you look at a lot of our GitHub Actions here, these GitHub Actions will be composite actions. Following other ones, so like Docker build. Here's the GitHub action for that. So, I share this largely because at your organization, if you're adopting GitHub and GitHub Actions, this is a really good pattern to follow. So here's a GitHub action that we manage, but this is really defining our implementation of how to do Docker builds and push. It is a composite action that under the hood calls just the official actions that anyone else can do. But this would be a lot of boilerplate to reproduce in every repository across the organization. So you can bundle that into a composite action and publish that. So that's what we're doing with a lot of our actions as part of our release engineering strategy at Cloud Posse for customers. All right. Any other questions I can get to? And I'll post this docs link as well.
I put some questions in the Q&A.
Oh, my bad. I didn't see that there. Okay, so one person posts about Strimzi for Kafka and production. Anyone have experience with that? We do not at Cloud Posse. This was the question. What is Strimzi? Oh, so it's an operator for Kafka and Kubernetes.
Yeah, it's like the Postgres, you know, how everyone is running. Well, not everyone, but there's some brave people running Postgres on Kubernetes. So this allows you to run Kafka.
Okay. Oh, that's cool.
Kafka I think, would be easier than running Postgres from a Kubernetes standpoint, based on how it scales and the storage for it. But I've not used it. I've managed Kafka, but I haven't used this to do it.
I just remember Kafka really not liking its IP change too often, and scaling it was non-trivial, and the way you do all the partitioning with it. Has that stuff improved?
Oh, you can make it work. Yeah.
Cool.
There's a telltale sign here from the docs, which doesn't tell you absolutely something, but it tells you that this is actually being used by major organizations who rely on it to some degree. And that is the keyword on the left side of FIPS support. If someone puts FIPS support in the left column, further up, it has it at the very top. Further up. Yeah, it had a very top seamless FIPS support, the very top, like 1.4 is in the very beginning. Which means either this was made for a government organization or someone making for government customers or something very early, which means someone in production very seriously is using it. Doesn't mean it's good quality or anything else, because government stuff isn't always, but it does mean this isn't just a playground thing. So that gets me a little, I would be much more likely to use it now, seeing that it's not some random thing someone just built. It definitely has users if someone went through that effort. And the amount of documentation to have it on as well.
Cool. That's good to know.
That's an interesting insight. Yeah. Okay. Next question, Isaac asks, what WAFs do you people recommend if one can't use AWS WAF because they don't use an ALB in their setup?
We, someone said use an ALB. Yes, use an ALB, but Nginx has a WAF module as well, which is useful. You could even do both.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you can still use an ALB in front of whatever load balancer, classic load balancer they have, I believe. So that's one option. You could also put probably an API gateway in front of it if it makes sense, and do that.
Nginx has a good WAF. So if you don't want to pay for a service directly, just pay for instances or something on Kubernetes. Nginx has a good WAF, mod security WAF module. It's been around a long time. It's well maintained.
I think I did see something about, okay, I'll take a look, but I might have seen something about that not being supported anymore, but I might be thinking about something else.
Which one of the comments not being supported anymore?
I think mod security.
Oh, okay. When I hear mod security, I think Apache. Was there mod security in Nginx?
Yeah, they use the same terminology. It's still being maintained. The supported by Nginx, you got to differentiate the Nginx that you pay for versus the open Nginx. The F5 Nginx thing, I know they've stopped maintaining. But last I haven't looked at it in probably a year, but last I looked at it.
I'm gonna post the link to what I saw in the chat.
I mean, and there's also always Cloudflare, right? And or Fastly or similar services.
I have to look into it, see if it's not maintained anymore. So it's going out of maintenance. Interesting.
Interesting. The Cloudflare WAF has been pretty enjoyable. We use it at Cloud Posse across all of our products. It's easy to configure. And the kind of thing you can turn up in an afternoon and be successful, depending on how complex your situation is, I guess. But
I'm curious though to hear more about, I know it was a quip, but I also think it was in seriousness about the use an ALB. What am I missing if I don't use an ALB in my setup?
what are you missing if you don't use it?
The only thing you're missing if you don't use it is if you're wanting the WAF functionality. Like if that's what you're saying, if you're not using AWS WAF is just the ease of use. The thing you won't be missing is where a WAF can hurt you is if you have a lot of transactions. If you have a normal control plane with normal users clicking through and doing stuff, you're fine. But let's say you have a metric ingest system getting like sending Kafka messages across the internet or sending sort of streaming data where you have millions of transactions a day. A WAF will get expensive because the AWS WAF charges you based on basically every single post or put or get that comes through. So
Right.
So it's really a cost question of, is it going to be cheaper to maintain your own versus using a WAF? If you don't have that super massive like data movement thing, you just have users using a system and some API calls, then a WAF is probably cheaper than maintaining your own.
Okay, that's good to know, because we do use Kafka to basically back up our event-driven microservices. So yes, we are sending a lot of data all around all the time. It's actually ridiculous how much it is. So
even my WAFs are normally for HTTP type stuff as well. So I'm not sure how that really, I've never seen Kafka through it, but we have a use case where we're sending that type of data over an HTTPS connection. And we had to change our batching strategy. Before it was every single metric was its own post. And we changed that to do very small batching, because we still need it, within a few seconds, but to batch up, 10 or so at a time. And that reduced our costs by 1/10, just because of the number of transactions charged through the WAF.
cool, that's great to know.
So if you're not using an ALB, are you using NLB, or are you using classic ELBs?
Oh, no, an NLB, and then it goes to Nginx.
Okay.
Well, an ALB does have a lot of other uses beyond an NLB, but it's a longer, because you can handle a lot of stuff at the ALB instead of at your Nginx.
You broke up there, so I couldn't quite hear what you said.
I mean, there are advantages of using ALB over doing everything at your Nginx. So it really depends on how comfortable you are with configuring your Nginx, right?
Right.
Couple of things I would add as far as using a load balancer. I mean, this is outside of the WAF discussion, but I would prefer to use a load balancer in front of a service running Nginx for a couple reasons. Number one, SSL termination. If you use it in conjunction with AWS Certificate Manager, then you could totally offload any sort of SSL termination from your backend, from your actual app. So Nginx just serves the content, doesn't have to worry about SSL termination. One less thing to worry about there. And then also, if you need to move your backend, like say you're running on a server now and you want to go to ECS or Kubernetes or whatever the case is, then you can reuse your load balancer and just move the backend. You don't have to change any other DNS configuration that you might have. I mean, generally speaking, you might have to make some changes, but generally speaking, you could use the same load balancer and just move the targets on the listeners and the targets that are attached to the load balancer to another backend. So that way you don't have to worry about breaking anything.
Okay, so this gets interesting because one of the things that I'm worried about is just how many hubs are in my system. So I do SSL termination at the ingress with the Nginx. We also use ACM, but at the beginning of the way the network traffic comes in, we also use a global accelerator, right? So I guess when I was designing this, I just didn't want to add another layer with global accelerator to load balancer to Nginx, throw in an ALB,
And the service mesh, don't forget. So you got Envoy in there.
Right. So I don't know. I have to think about it a little bit more. If an ALB is worth the trouble just for the simplicity of the AWS WAF.
It's also a cost, because you do pay for the bandwidth, some of the bandwidth.
Right. And I think we pay for the rules too.
I forget that there's different things in ALB. In our case, it's largely just the bandwidth coming through it that we're paying for.
Oh, I was talking about the WAF rules, but yeah, you're right.
Oh, so WAF rules are separate. Yeah, WAF rules you pay based on the transactions, number of actual host inputs. Essentially, it's more being Amazon. It's always more complicated than that, but that's essentially the best measurement. Along with the number, along with the number of rules processed. So there's a combination of factors that cause the WAF to be expensive. It can cause the WAF to be expensive.
John Roberts asks, how do you terminate at Nginx with an ACM certificate?
Yeah, because you mentioned you use Nginx, but you also use ACM. How are you doing that?
So you can use self-signed certs on your Nginx services, and then you have so you re-encrypt basically.
That's what I was asking. I'm assuming that's what he does. That's what we do as well. That's what. So I'm assuming you're terminating at your NLB and then self-signing to the Nginx, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Oh,
Well,
Jeremy White was asking here. Have any other folks made the jump to Amazon Linux 2023? If so, any interesting hurdles to all the changed packages? Sean Roberts says they're waiting on FIPS for Amazon Linux. Yeah.
Do it till then.
I mean, 2023 is nearing an end, so
He's been holding his breath this whole time. Okay.
yeah. The only reason I was mentioning it was in starting to work with GitHub runners and changes on those. We saw the glibc changes that were required for Node.js 20, and we were just looking at or considering other options out there besides going to Amazon Linux 2023. So made for an interesting discussion. I'm probably going to kick the tires on Ubuntu or something else, just because it's not appealing to look at something that, oh, okay, this lasts for a year.
Yeah, exactly.
Versus an LTS that might be 4 years.
Yeah. I like the idea of just pairing our GitHub runners with whatever GitHub Cloud is using, and then being a few degrees less away from them. Cool. Yeah. Any other questions? That answers that one.
Well, just because you said the word service mesh, my last question, I'm asking a lot today. For those using Istio or other service meshes that are continually issuing new certificates, right, every few hours or something, with Kubernetes, I'm curious what people are using for their certificate issuance. Are you just trusting Cert Manager itself? Are you offloading that to Vault CA, offloading it to private CA, ACM? There's a few options. So a lot of people use the default, which is just let Cert Manager do it without a backed trusted CA.
Yeah. Well, for your signed certificates, that Cert Manager is a big liability if you're doing those environments, especially any ephemeral environments generating names. Big warning there.
Yeah.
However, there is something cool, which is zero SSL. Horrible name for a SSL provider, but zero SSL, which supports the Acme protocol. And then you don't get rate limited. And for a very nominal fee, you can pay to not get rate limited for signed certificates.
Are you meaning for the public ones or for the internal ones that are continuing?
For the public ones, yeah.
For the public, yeah. Yeah, for the public, we have either ACM or Let's Encrypt, depending on what we want it for. It's for the internal one.
But Let's Encrypt will rate limit you to very quickly.
Not unless you give them a donation. So
really? You can pay your way.
Donate. Yeah, you can donate to them. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's not as contractual as this with zero SSL. We've been using them a long time. So
okay.
But I was more interested in the internal certificates, what people were doing.
Gotcha.
I looked at using a private ACM, and when it was like just for one cluster, it was like $4,000 a year or something like that. Something crazy. It was more than that. It was more
private CA stuff.
Private ACM, if you have tons of pods and you're reissuing the certs continually, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
I actually do have a question about that, for people that also use it. So I went the lazy way route and I have a different one for my various environments, but I believe it's possible to share. Is that correct or incorrect?
What was it? Oh, the medium.
Just share that.
Share the private ACM, private CA from ACM across various accounts.
Yeah, I mean, it's just IAM rules. So you could have a one-in-one account and then IAM can go with
Yeah.
them all. Which
So I
makes sense
think-
from a cost standpoint because the cost of ACM gets lower the more certificates you make. So if you're allowed to consolidate, then yeah, you can.
Yeah, I need to put an item on the backlog to do that.
When we started doing it for symmetry, we were provisioning one per account, and it just was like, I think it's 400, a minimum of $400 each.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
it adds up. So now our recommendation is just to provision two. So at least you have one you can make changes to and test things on without it being the production private ACM.
That's a good idea. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, traffic is a pretty cool, yeah, Nginx alternative. It looks like you can run it in ECS, you can run it in Kubernetes as your ingress, supports a lot of things out of the box that you don't get with Nginx ingress.
I have one final question, and this is more of a fun thing. I don't know if anyone has played with it, but you know how there's like 17 million ways to run containers in AWS? Just wondering if you really just wanted the simplest way. Would that be App Manager, or they have another one? I forget what it's called.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I was saying App Runner.
Yeah.
Right, App Runner, and there's one other one.
Yeah. They're so similar. I always get them mixed up.
The only thing with App Runner is
Maybe
keep in mind, I don't think it runs in your VPC. So if you have security controls, it could be an issue.
They
They
just,
may have, yeah, I
would
think
you
they just
consider
added VPC support for
yeah.
App Runner.
Sorry. I was gonna ask, would you consider light stale containers to be simple?
I mean, I haven't used it. That's the question, like the thing that you can get it running in, like, I don't know, let's say 30 minutes.
Amplify is the other one I was getting confused with. There's also Amplify. So what we usually see amongst customers that are looking for something like that, it's a split between App Runner and Amplify. And I couldn't tell you which one. Is Amplify only static sites though? That's not containers, maybe.
Well, Amplify is more for like the backend services that a web or mobile app would use, as opposed to the actual runtime itself.
Okay.
I could be mistaken, but that's my understanding, that it gives you, it automates the creation of the cloud fronts and the databases and the authentication and all that kind of stuff that you can then surface or access from your application.
So it was Lightsail I was thinking about. Yeah, Lightsail or App Runner.
And there is, I'm not suggesting necessarily this, but if you do like the Heroku experience, Amazon created a CLI that kind of recreates that experience for you. And it's not as obtuse as using the AWS CLI. So this is a CLI optimized for ECS. And it supports Docker compositions, which is kind of cool.
It might just be me, but at my org, most things run on EKS, and then there's this team that is in love with ECS. And every time something breaks and breaks badly, it is ECS related. So I have a really, really bad relationship with ECS and don't want to support anything around it anymore. It looks simple deceptively, but there's so many things on ECS and they can break at any point. I remember one where nothing seemed to be working and you can't even get logs because it's not even able to start the container. So you don't know what is going on and you don't know, if you don't know to check for that. We eventually figured it out, but this team really runs simple containers. So I'm just looking for something simpler for them.
Yeah.
So I don't have to spend.
Yeah, the events don't
5
always go to
hours.
CloudTrail,
Yeah.
so it can be really tricky.
But yeah, if it's a crazy, crazy simple container, Lambda might be the best bet for visibility. Like, especially if it's request based, that is.
Or code build if it needs to run longer.
Keep in mind that Lambda now supports simple containerized Lambdas that just provide an endpoint automatically. So you don't need to spin up the load balancers and all that other stuff.
Yes, and I can testify to that. That is awesome.
Wait,
I
say
really,
that
really
again?
appreciate that.
What's
So-
been
so-
a balancer for you?
No, so basically there's a function for Lambda where you can deploy your Lambda function and you get a HTTPS endpoint automatically. So you really don't have to spin up API gateway. You don't have to spin up a load balancer, et cetera, et cetera. However, you can still connect your Lambda to a load balancer as a Lambda target, but you don't have to. And it makes deploying a web function to a Lambda crazy, crazy simple. It's really cool.
Yeah, this was the announcement here. They're calling it Lambda function URLs.
That's really good to know. I haven't kept up with serverless stuff.
Yeah. So standard limitations of Lambda apply, but it sounds like maybe they're deploying pretty simple containers. So that could be an option.
Yeah, I like that option for like pure Python HTTP services. It just works, and you don't have to do a lot of the stuff that you would have to do for like an API gateway or for a load balancer or something like that. You just spin it up and you get your endpoint and you go and you're done.
Sounds really cool. I'll check this out. Thanks.
Oh, and well, yeah, glad. There's 25 ways to run on AWS. Or 17. Yeah, I think he said he's not going to continue updating this one, but he had a post on all the different ways. All righty. Oh, scaling containers is up now. No, we did write something. Oh, and there isn't any scaling in 2023 follow-up. That's what I get for skimming. All right. Well, we reached the end of the hour, folks. Thank you for joining us here on Office Hours. We'll host another session as usual next week, same time, same place. Please remember to register if you haven't already. Also, we'll be posting a recording of this session to our YouTube channel in a few hours. If you just go to youtube.com/cloudposse, you'll find it there, so you can share it with your team. Again, to register for our weekly office hours, go to cloudposse.com/office hours. Also, just a reminder, since I think it caught someone else up, we did change our Zoom link recently, and we are now managing our office hours subscriptions differently. So make sure you've registered at cloudposse.com/office hours if you want that join link. We syndicate our office hours as a podcast, so you can listen to that however you listen to podcasts. Find that by going to podcast.cloudposse.com. And if you're curious about hiring Cloud Posse or seeing if we can move the needle for you at your organization, please go to cloudposse.com/quiz. Again, cloudposse.com/quiz. Answer a few quick questions and you'll book a session with me directly. Talk to you soon. Take care.